Going to start. All right, we'll call this afternoon's Public Infrastructure and Environmental Sustainability meeting to order. Is there a motion to approve the August 24th, 2020 minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving these minutes indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, nay?
Aye.
Any abstentions? All right, the minutes are approved, and we're going to go to staff requests, and we're going to go the first one's in order, but we're going to save rate setting for the end of all kind of staff and strategic initiatives. But to start with, we have Catherine Miller for Ecology Stormwater Grants applications.
Good afternoon, Council President and Council. This item actually was on consent, and it might have been mistakenly pulled off to staff. So if there are any questions, this is a standing ecology grant that we've been chasing for several years now. We are reapplying for the same area, Cochrane Basin, to continue the work we're doing out there for the stormwater. Happy to answer any questions.
Can you just tell us what the financial scale is? Can you tell us the financial scale of the request and the projects that we're trying to fund?
No problem. So Ecology gives basically up to $5 million a year. They've been doing this consecutively for several years. And we've got multi-million dollars worth of project costs out there in the Cochrane Basin spread over several different projects. TJ Munich and all the piping in that roadway being one of them, but we've got piping that goes through the golf course as well, ultimately to our infiltration area, which is the disc golf course area. So all these components we've been applying over the last several years in $5 million chunks because that's the maximum they give any 1 year. So again, we weren't successful last year, and we're basically reapplying.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Council President, this is Councilmember Mumm. I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Hey, Catherine, just really appreciate you trying every year for this. I know it's so important and it's a huge, huge project. Just wondering, is this just purely through ecology, or are there any touches with the legislature on this in terms of funding for MOTCA money or anything that we could help with?
In this case, this is tied a little bit to our clean water plan that we were discussing early on with ecology over the years, that we wanted to do what we could, not only for the river through CSO, but looking out at stormwater as well. Stormwater is an interesting one because it's not required right now. And once it becomes anything that becomes required by ecology, you are no longer eligible for grants. So we felt that this was a good project because it takes a significant amount of stormwater out of the river that goes directly there today. And it also holds I think it was almost 50% of our loading of the river with contaminants, if you will, come through this one pipe. So that's why historically we've been focused on this particular area and removing that one pipe out of the system. In terms of MOTCA, I'd let Mark answer that. Mark Papich is also online here.
Yeah, this is Mark. I think this particular source of funding, which ecology coins it as SFAP funding, I think it does have some in it, but I couldn't say for sure how much.
Okay, thank you. Well, if there's anything that the legislative team can do on the city side, or our intergovernmental affairs director, Eric Paul, if it has any legislative touch, just let us know. We worked hard to get that MOTCA funding a different volumetric, capacity in order to get sort of right-sized. So that was just a small thing, but maybe there might be a little more available, but good luck.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, not seeing any. Scott Simmons, if you could get us up to date on the Havana Road issue, and I see that you just emailed us with some documents so people could check their email.
Yes, I can do that. I'm going to share really quick. It looks like these did not make it in the agenda package, so I want to orient council here. If Let's see here. Okay. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Excellent. The end of August, the Spokane County had sent a letter to the city to petition the city to take over responsibility and ownership of the right-of-way on Havana Street, just north of Broadway, which is just south of the bridge, all the way down to 8th Avenue. Currently, the city, our right-of-way demarcation is the middle of the road, all the way up between 8th and just north of Broadway. When the Valley incorporated, my understanding is that they only incorporated over to the back of sidewalk, essentially, along Havana. That left a piece of roadway that the county still owned, a half a piece of roadway between the two areas. There is an RCW that allows counties to petition municipalities to take over responsibility for the right-of-way when there is no connection to their county system, which is what Havana is. Unfortunately, Havana is not in great shape. It's not been maintained. A high degree of traffic does come in to the county fairgrounds facility here. I had requested, when the county had approached me on this, to look at splitting responsibility and designating north of Sprague up to basically the bridge to the city of the Valley, since the majority of that traffic is likely coming into the fairgrounds, and that the city would agree to take responsibility from Sprague south to 8th. They declined to do that. So with this is the petition to take on the entirety of it. So I wanted to make council aware of it. As I said, it is a road that has not been maintained. It is not in great condition, so it is going to be a financial obligation when we move it into our arterial system. As I've talked with our legal folks, it doesn't appear that we have recourse or ability to reject, as I understand it, but certainly something council may want to consider and discuss further with our city attorney's office. So I wanted to make this council aware of that action and see if there were any questions.
Hey, Scott. Do we know what the estimated cost of a rebuild on Havana or whatever sort of road work is needed there?
It's not something in our plan right now. We haven't scoped it for. Actually, it might be half of it might be on our plan out in 2025-26, but early on in the process, we don't really have a sense of what it might cost.
And is there a reason why the county has decided to try to gift this to us and not the Valley? Could they have given it to the Valley, or?
My understanding is that the RCW only touches on the petitioning of the municipal entity that has a portion of the right-of-way today, which we do. We have to the center line of the roadway. If we had owned back of the sidewalk, if the Valley had owned back of sidewalk, that would have probably been a different situation. So I think the vehicle that they're looking at is the RCW that petitions the municipal that has the boundary out into the roadway.
Could we just unincorporate half that street?
I suppose we could probably look at doing a couple different things. I mean, I'm also okay if we can, we could go to the Valley and ask them if they would be willing to do a sharing of this. I just don't know if we can compel them to.
it just feels to me like we're getting stuck with a big bill, and I would rather look at any other option that we could before agreeing to pay a bunch of money on this thing.
I agree. So I'll reach out to the Valley and see if there is an opportunity to do something different on this. What I want to do is just bring this to the attention of council, letting you know that it was a petition that had come to us, and then hear some feedback if there are some other ideas from this team.
Scott, this is Councilwoman Mum.
Yes.
Going to technically annex city.
We can't.
Is that what the action is?
Could you say that again, Candace? Or, Candace, we didn't hear you for a minute. Can you restate that?
Is the process here this portion into the city?
You kind of broke up again, but I think you asked if this is an annexation action. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. Annexation. I can't hear you. Your microphone.
Because I'm muted. My understanding is that it's not. It's a right-of-way only action, not an annexation action. It's a right-of-way transfer.
But wouldn't we need to move the city limits there then?
We would.
So I do think it is an annexation. I think we should just double check on that because it's a city limit. And in our annexation documents and our process, we have the right to require that the quality of the infrastructure that we are receiving, whether it's lighting or roadways, equals our quality. And so I think we need to lean on that because for what we're getting, what I'm hearing, a substandard quality roadway that we're going to be required to repair. And I believe that we have the right to require either funding to repair it or have them repair it until we receive it.
I think the equity argument is spot on. Let me ask some more questions around the annexation. That could be something that we could lean on.
Okay, and then when we, sure. So what you're saying is staff at the county, the city of the Valley that declined to the sharing. Is that right?
My discussions were with the staff at the county, and they declined the action. The resolution that the county commissioners took was to petition just the city of Spokane.
Okay, understood. This might be something Eric Polson might want to get involved with, council president. Happy to help.
Yep. It's kind of unfortunate that we're not having the regional collaboration that we're trying to build on it, but we can deploy Mr. Polson and our lawyers. It just seems like there's a strong interest in having the road fronting the fairgrounds in good shape, but it's not in our budget to do it at this point. So I think it'd be good to get a mutual agreement from all the beneficiaries of it. But thanks, Scott, for bringing it to our attention. So it's in our world. Appreciate that.
You bet, and thanks for the ideas too. We'll keep pursuing this.
All right, next up I have Garrett Jones to give council an update on open space planning for the Parks Department.
Well, perfect. Thank you, Council President, and good afternoon, everyone. Happy, beautiful Monday. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Just give you an update, I mean, it's an exciting time for Parks and Recreation right now, and it's not too often, only within the, every 6 to 10 years, we're able to really engage the public on what we're doing well, what we're not, what are the gaps in the system, and how we can do better in the future. So this is an exciting time as we move through it. I'll kind of show you the progress. We got a little stumbled here because of 2020 kind of got in the way, but I also think brings a lot of opportunities in Parks and Recreation as we move forward. And let me So the project intent, as I mentioned, is really an agency document to guide us for strategically in the next 6 to 10 years. And also state law, we need to have a master plan on file, so this can help with grant applications, and then also in the past can really kind of form what type of major funding mechanisms we want to use as a city for the future in improving our parks. You know, a lot of our other goals is really to provide a clean, safe, and eco-friendly park and trail conservation lands and rec facilities, provide accessible leisure and rec opportunities. And accessible is an important piece to this, as a lot of our parks are historic parks. A lot of our features and amenities are historic, and accessibility can be a challenge. And so we think that's going to be very a high priority on the list for the community. And also provide an enhanced urban forest in a number of different ways through our projects, preserving our natural lands, looking at future land acquisitions. And so that is another high priority for us as we move into the Park and Open Space Plan. And so we really want to be strategic with our resources. So one is, what do we got? Where do we have it? And how are we going to look at improving our facilities and really working with the community and having the community be involved in how they're going to shape our facilities in the future. And then our biggest point for this Parks and Open Space Plan is the balance of internal and external communications and input. And our last Park and Open Space Plan was completed in 2010. That plan was very internally driven by staff. We want the opposite to happen in this plan, be very driven by public. And so you can see on the public relations side of our public and stakeholder engagement plan, we want focus groups, we want stakeholder interviews, community workshops, different pop-up surveys, you know, be it farmers markets, mailed surveys, equity mapping, level of service analysis, and also project branding. We want people to be excited about what the future is for our parks and open spaces. And so branding is an important piece of that as well. How can we engage all demographics of the community? And then also on the department operations side, looking at our level of service, really what our program inventories are, and looking at our organization and the structure and staffing assessment. What are we doing well? What are we not? Where are the gaps? And strategically looking at shifting staff to be able to fulfill those gaps. And then our financial review and funding strategies as we try to create a sustainable financial plan for the future. And then project prioritization, prioritizing our projects is a huge one. And this is really also driven by the community of really setting up what those big investments will be in the future. And to give it back a little bit, so Parks and Recreation and our outer parks have not seen significant improvements or a package since 1999. That was the last bond that touched outer parks. And so we're really looking forward to this analysis to see what that next 10 years is going to show us. And the biggest for us is to engage all sectors of the community. So how can we work with our consultant to reach everyone in this community so everyone has an equal voice on how they want to see their parks and open spaces? And so what this process will look like, so we have the master plan up on top. We have the project advisory committee. So a part of that is the park board, city council, mayor staff, and then park staff, planning staff, and also integrated capital management staff. We really want the park board and city council to be at the forefront in the beginning, because as we know, a lot of these plans turn into strategic funding models for the future, whether that's an example as the Riverfront Park Master Plan or others. So we want everyone to be a part of this. And then ultimately, too, Park Board, City, and Council would adopt our update to our Park and Open Space Plan. And then so we have staff consultant input, public input from a number of different ways that I mentioned before. And then also we have a citizen advisory committee that would make sure that we're in check along the entire process and have updates and touch points. And we've learned a lot from our Riverfront Park Master Plan and project process, and engaging the Citizen Advisory Committee and our executive team with the Park Board and City Council is crucial along the way. So getting started, I wish these bullet points were a lot more. But in June and 19 in February, we started with the park board retreats, really drafted our requests for qualifications, our scope, and awarded to the design workshop in February of 2020 with a great, outstanding team. We had over 5 applicants that came back to us. And then everyone knows what happened in March. And for us, we had to take a pause because of our capital planning, and our funding is tied to our operational budget. So we had to hold on all our projects across the board, and also really wanted to rethink what that public engagement would look like in the future. And here's just a quick makeup of what the team is. Design Workshop is the prime consultant, a ton of history there. And then we also have our the ETM. This is really an operation, like how are you doing internally in the most efficient way. We have a local firm in SPVB that's really bringing in some institutional knowledge and some assessments, some of the historical perspective. And then Synergy is helping us with the public outreach component. So here's the initial project plan. I'm not going to touch much on this, but we wanted the plan to be completed and adopted by the end of 2020. And what happened was we were set back a little bit. And so now we're going to see a lot of this work happen in 2021. And with the draft plan and revisions into early summer next year, with the plan adoption into September and October of next year, in time for the grant cycle with the state in 2022. We also think this pause was, there's always a silver lining in everything that we do. And this pause of COVID and all the other strains that happened to our community really shined a different light on parks and open space, and the importance of parks during a crisis or a pandemic, the importance of our citizens going outside, people using our parks in different ways. So we think there's a ton of energy out there and ideas about what our parks and open spaces could look like in our next generation. So we're actually excited. What happened this year is really going to help us launch into 2021 to finish this plan. Real quickly, just touching on some of the branding. Again, we want people to be excited. One's just looking at our current type branding and what that could look like and how we can use this to our advantage. That adds excitement, looks at the younger generations, the older generations. And here's 2 different types that one's building on kind of the contemporary, this is what we have today. And then the other is really looking at building on our legacy and really preserving and playing and parks to people is important to us. So how can we continue to enhance that relationship between the two? And here's just a couple other images that we've been working on to launch our plan. And here's some just mapping that's been happening behind the scenes that doesn't need a lot of community engagement. This is just an area of, what type of parks do we have? Where are they at? How accessible are they from a quarter-mile or half-mile radius? Where do we see those gaps where we don't have those colors, and how do we look at maybe infilling those in the future? Looking at our trails and bikeways and those connections and tying into existing plans. The hydrology, as far as we play an important role in Parks and Recreation and our hydraulic makeup in our region. Social infrastructure, libraries, museums, schools, those proximities to our parks. Public transit, the racial ethnic diversity of what type of people are living where is important to us, and the age distribution as well. Where do we see younger generations wanting to raise their families? Where do we see communities and neighborhoods where people want to retire? And that's important to us of how we're going to invest in our parks in the future and knowing what those trends are. So with that, we hit a hiccup, but we're really excited with the momentum that we have to move forward and finish this plan and have the engagement of the City Council, Park Board, and the public late into this year and then into 2021. Any questions?
This is Karen.
Go
Can
ahead.
I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Always.
I'm assuming that, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it. I'm assuming that as we continue down this road and part of those community discussions will involve our neighborhood councils and community assembly. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Garrett. It's Candace. Could you send that great research? I'd love to see that demographic research.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Hey, Garrett, Mike Alfred, are you looking at this as sort of phase one of maybe going to the ballot to ask the voters to provide some additional funding for parks?
You know, I think it's important we start having those conversations. As we continue to invest and we know the importance of our parks and open space, really focusing on a neighborhood level seems to be that trend that we're moving in. And again, not seeing that large investment since 1999. And we learned a lot from the open space plan from Riverfront Park, and that was a great tool that ultimately got us some great improvements in the park. And we hope that does the same as well, whether, it's accessibility, safety, play, and really looking at how do we connect neighborhoods. And we look at opportunities as well, whether it's new acquisitions or do we have some lands that would be better used in some other capacity as well. So looking at the surplus on that other end and really having the community, again, we haven't had a plan for a long time that is community driven. And that's something from a staff perspective that we think is so important, especially in these times.
Garrett,
Last question. Is safety, security going to be part of this master plan?
Yes. And so right now we do a lot of one-offs, and we have a great relationship with SPD and SEPTED analysis, but there's so much that you can do from infrastructure, programming, and the way you design facilities that the indirect benefit is safety improvements. And so we want every family to feel safe going to their park. That's when we know that we've succeeded. And so we want to find every way, and that's going to be a huge component. And I could probably guess that's going to be one of the top priorities from a lot of the neighborhoods as well, is safe, feeling safe in our parks.
Go ahead, Candace.
Garrett, I have just one other question, and it involves the county. We have really been spending, really hundreds of thousands of dollars on places like Camp Saconnie, which is in the county, Fish Lake Trail, the county. Are we coordinating with them on this sort of planning action? There are some areas in the city where the county is not providing park services because they really are leaning on the city of Spokane to provide those parks. We need to have that discussion with them for their planning because I see this happening, and I want to make sure that they are providing their level of service as well to their citizens. And we could cooperatively plan with them. But I think our citizens are maybe a little weary of funding these suburban areas that don't have any parks for the county citizens.
Great comment. Yes, to answer the first question, yes, we're going to coordinate the entire way with our county partners. And that's another thing that through the 2020 is really enhanced that coordination between the county and city. On thinking creatively. And as an example, so one project that has been on the list for a very long time is out of city limits, but is managed by the city, and that's the connection of the Fish Lake Trail into Fish Lake. And, as that being a priority, thinking outside of the box, collaboratively, county, city, how we're going to manage and fund those type of projects. And then overlapping the level of service analysis for city facilities and county facilities, like 5 Mile, Palisades, and Camp Saconnie. But they have a great planning team on their staff, and we're going to be engaging with them the entire way. So, a great comment.
Well, I don't know after this, but I know on 5 Mile, we were looking at imposing impact fees and having some financial consideration. We're not being, with hearing exam in the county, parks level of service, which they're required to do, just like we are. And I don't know if we need to revisit that, especially, when we're looking at operationally funding these park services completely outside of our city limits. I got to put it out there for our taxpayers.
You kind of broke up there, but I think too, it's important to add too, there's the leg of their team that we're going to look at the financial distribution and how much of our resources that we spread out through the entire system. And I think that'll help us as well. And then identify opportunities, whether it's impact fees, bonds, levies, whatever it may be, of continuing to maintain our facilities. And that's one disadvantage is we've had in the past, we have great ways to fund capital improvements, and then it's the O&M on the other side that we need to think strategically of how we don't take away from another location. So no, these are great points that I wrote down, and I will make sure once we relaunch here late this fall and then really hit the community engagement early spring of 2021 that these are great considerations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Then I will leave you, Garrett. We've chatted before about this, but in public and in front of other council members, I just wanted to renew consideration for a dog park overlay and all these places. We've started to see a really exciting model where the people who use the dog parks will take over the operations of them and taking care of that. And the main thing that we need is some fencing to separate. And there's so many parks where there's conflicts between dogs and people. So you can kind of do that even on schoolyards. So I hope that will be part of the planning discussion. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda, I have Clint Harris to talk about Transmap pavement assessment.
Good afternoon, Council President and Council. So the street department's looking at a project to do under the strategic initiative rapidly accelerating street maintenance projects, and this is to assess the pavement information that's historically been completed using seasonal workers to gather the information. It was then put into an asset management database that the department has used. The department has been evaluating innovative ways to improve the current processes. Transmap is a vendor that provides pavement inspection and management services and was selected through the procurement process after RFQs were solicited for the service. The data is collected using the vendor's proprietary pavement inspection vehicle, which uses multiple sensors and cameras to measure the pavement condition and then rank it. Using this process to gather information results in more consistent and accurate data, and it's also much safer together. The technology enables the vehicle to drive through the streets in a normal traffic flow, detecting or gathering the information, and then the information's compiled and put into report formats that we would use then to put into our database, and it would be helpful to correlate what we have in currently, as well as gathering. Normally we gather our information by quadrant once every 4 years. This would gather all the arterial street information in 1 year. And if it's successful, we would look at using this for our residential streets in the future. Questions?
Any questions for Mr. Harris? It sounds like a great idea. I think a lot of people will be happy, and they'll be especially happy if we're able to expand it to residential streets, because that's where people feel like they aren't being heard on that. And I know we only have so many resources, but it'd be very helpful to have the data on them so that we could respond and compare it. That's awesome.
Agreed.
All right. Then I think that brings us back to a continuation of rate setting process for city utilities. Scott Simmons.
Thanks, Brian. How much time do you want us to target for this? I know you had some other things that you wanted to cover.
I think we have plenty of time. So let's just, we have plenty of time to talk about it. So.
Okay, so what I thought we'd start with first, Marlene's going to pull up a timeline schedule that she's developed here. We wanted to walk council through what our timelines look like. We're getting close to, we're only 3 months from the end of the year, and given the timing for adopting budget and trying to have our rates adopted prior to that, because our rates really inform what our budget needs to be, we've used that as kind of a backstop to walk backwards to today and map out what likely timelines need to look like. There's a different timeline for solid waste because we have a longer notification process under the RCWs than we do from water and wastewater. So I'm gonna turn it over to Marlene and let her walk you through what this timeline looks like.
So good afternoon, Council. Yeah, it's actually, it feels really tight to me, this schedule. So I just want to warn you as we take a look at it. So
Can you increase
the...
Marlene, can you increase the magnification of it? I know you'll lose the last line of it, but...
Let's see if we can try. See if it'll just pop to one screen and then we can just scroll as we go here. Is that better, Council President?
Yeah, I can. Well, it's better for me, but if someone else needs more, let us know.
Maybe just a little more.
A little more, got it. Sorry.
Yep, that's much better. Yep.
Okay. So obviously today's the 28th and we're reviewing at the PIES committee. In order to, so as Scott mentioned, what we're trying to do is get rates adopted prior to your planned adoption of the 2021 budget. So we'd like to get this all wrapped up by the 9th of November so that you can have budget adoption days that you're looking at on the 16th and the 23rd, I believe are those 2 dates. So with that schedule, we'd want to do solid waste rate ordinances first. They require a 45-day, they require publication in a newspaper of record for 2 weeks prior to 45 days before implementation. So that's another thing that's driving this calendar. So that would mean that we'd have to complete the solid waste rate ordinances by Tuesday, the 13th of October to add them to your agenda on the 14th, which would bring us to advanced briefing on those solid waste rates on the 19th. And then obviously first reading would be the following week on the 26th with adoption and anticipated adoption of the rates on Monday, November 2nd. Then a week later, after we add those solid waste ordinances to the council agenda, we would add the water and wastewater rate ordinances. So their advanced briefing of those would happen also on the 26th. That would be a PIES committee day, so we could go over any questions you might have that day as well. And then first reading for the water wastewater rates would be the 2nd of November, and finally adoption on Monday the 9th. We have more flexibility with water wastewater. We need, for those to take effect on January 1st, we would need 30 days, obviously, just on your normal ordinance schedule. So you can see, I'm not sure how many ordinances we'll have. I'm working with legal right now to identify those, but it could be, in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 ordinances to get through all of the various components of these rates. So if anybody has any questions about that.
Questions, anyone?
Yes, I do. Hi, Marlene. Lori Kinnear. Is there any conversation around collecting the utility taxes that out-of-city ratepayers owe utilities?
The utility taxes?
Yeah.
On the sewage treatment.
Sewage treatment, sorry.
Oh, that isn't, I'm really looking here at the basic rates for utilities. So that's another conversation we can certainly have. But this is really about getting our customer rates in place in general.
Okay, and then is there any discussion around, I know we had a lengthy conversation about high water users and a surcharge for them. Is that somewhere baked in here?
So we would want to touch bases with you again. We have a final solid waste presentation to give you today, and then we'd want to circle back around on water, wastewater to see what your final decisions are there. So we did provide some additional information to council following our last study session, and certainly there's an option there to add a high user or a super user tier in the residential structure. We did anticipate that in the commercial structure, so it's something we certainly can add to the residential structure if that is what council would like to do.
And then I'm assuming that we're talking about smart meters as well, so that we can help people reduce their water usage at some point, maybe do a pilot or something like that. And then the other piece is that 2.9% is loosely based on inflation, so that we're really not increasing the price per se, but really trying to mimic what we think inflation will be over those years. Has anyone done a study of what inflation actually is over the last 5 years? Let's not include the recession years, but the last 5 years. Do we have any sense of what inflation has been?
We usually do 20 years.
Well, we can't do that because the so-called Great Recession has thrown all of our numbers off.
They're gone. Great Recession's done. It's 22, so we don't need to use that one anymore. Oh, but you're right, we could re-up it. Yeah. We need to redo it, but it's a 20-year outlook.
But that's what I'm saying. So if you go forward, can we get a more, I'd like something a little bit more solid than just 2.9, because it might be 3.2 or it could be 3.5. So is there something that you have that you've already researched that can inform us a little better on that?
We could sure take a look at that. You know, the 2.9% was the historic value that we created when we sold the revenue bonds, and that's what we committed, is that we would try to limit rate increases to 2.9%, which represented 25-year average CPI over that time period leading up to that 2014 sale of those revenue bonds. So that was we kind of used it as sort of a static commitment, but we certainly could take a look and see what a new 25-year look would look like.
I think that would be smart. At least we'll be informed at that point. So we're not just going along with 2.9 just because. We have some data to back that up. Thank you.
Marlene, just to piggyback on that, I too would like to get that information, but I would also like to see any numbers reflective of increase in use from population growth. I think that's certainly something that we can account for, but because to me, I just don't want to raise rates above inflation plus population growth. I think that's where we should stick with, and so I'd love to get an accurate number on that.
Okay, we can work on that.
And I also, I think the 25-year update is good, but I also would like to see something from perhaps 2012 through 2019 as well, just so that we understand how the 25-year comes to be.
So we'll get this sent out to council. We'll highlight some of the stuff is our work that we need to do, like the finalizing the rate ordinances, bringing those things in. We'll highlight those that are specific council actions. Everything that you see in here are to one of the questions that Lori asked. We've presented to council the mayor's recommendation, and they do include the water tier increases, the adding a high user surcharge to the commercial users, pretreatment, leveling those revenues out, and then on the solid waste, we'll go through those in a little bit here. So those are all reflective in our projections today that we would be bringing forward to council. But these touchbacks now with you are to see if you had other requests, thoughts for us. If there's no other questions on this schedule, we'll jump over into the solid waste refresh with you. All righty. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. And this is the presentation that we provided you back in June. It was 3 months ago. We've pared down some of the slides just to kind of give what we thought were the real critical pieces that we wanted to do a refresh. So this is the projections that we had shared with you with simply moving forward with 2.9% rate increases. And the area that I wanted to highlight here is look at the reserves out into 2025. What we had shared with you at the time is reserves are dwindling. And we'll remind you of kind of what was contributing those things in a minute here. But that's the piece that we really flagged that we need to adjust somewhere in our financial model so that we were maintaining at least some level of healthy reserves. The 3 months operating is a reminder of what the rating agencies recommend for any utility to have in place. We don't have any debt service. We don't have any debt out right now through the solid waste. We don't have any near-term plans for some. So I think it's a good target for us, but we're not necessarily being held to that standard as it relates to current debt outstanding, interest rates, any of that sort of stuff. That will take some time to get back up to that level and in order to not make a real big impact on affordability for our citizens. So let's jump to the next one, Marlene. I think this was yours, right?
Yeah. So this is just an update. The last time we were here, we basically showed you this through maybe the middle of June. So you can see that this is looking at business accounts, primarily dumpster accounts. And orange is our 2020 year. So we had a major dip early in the pandemic, and you can see we hit our low in early May, our low point. And now we've rebounded some, but we still haven't reached those 2019 levels. You can see that we're down in the 2018 level. So while we've come back up, and that's a good sign for us, we still haven't reached the levels we saw in last year at this time. So we're still seeing business impacts, certainly by the pandemic. So here we are. This is our revenues through August. Our billings through August, right? So we're also down. We have delinquencies totaling. Our delinquency rate has gone up. The number of accounts that are delinquent past 60 days is up 77%, and the amount that is delinquent since that compared to January of this year, and the amount that's delinquent over 60 days is up another 56%. So we're also concerned that even though our billings aren't off by that much, we also are seeing a lag in cash flow coming in to our utilities. Here you can see that.
I have a question about that, if I may, Marlene. I'm sorry. This is Candace. Do we have the ability to lien those properties?
I would have to check with Elizabeth. I mean, we have a current moratorium at the state level against shutting off water, so I'm not sure where that would put us in terms of liening property.
But from solid waste?
Yes, there's a moratorium on all utilities. So
no, I knew we could do it for water, but I didn't know if we could, if we, once COVID is done, if we have.
Yeah, I don't know if we can lien for solid waste. I know we can lien for water, but I'm not sure.
Hey, that's what I was wondering. We should probably look into that.
Yeah.
Because we need people to pay.
We need them to
pay back up. Thank you.
You can see that we're over budget by a little bit, 0.5%. But we still haven't, we really should be seeing at least a 2.9% increase over 2019 actuals based on the the rates that we implemented last year. So this is still somewhat weak, I would guess. That's how you would put that. Scott, was this mine as well?
Yes.
Okay. So here, we spent a lot of time last time talking about recycling, and here you can see just a reminder of where those costs have gone since the major changes as a result of the China sword policy and the reduction in prices of commodities, recyclable commodities. So in 2020, we expect to pay $1.4 million to handle recyclables compared to basically a break-even point where we're at in 2013. So our cost is 100 times more than in 2013 to deal with those recyclable goods. So obviously, things are changing. This is a really fluid part of our business, but it's something that we are seeing an impact on our reserves long-term if this kind of price weakness continues.
This is me. So there's two things that we've shared with council back in June as ways to deal with the recycling challenges that we're seeing and the impacts on our revenue streams. The first option we had shared is changing the recycling collection to every other week. Currently, our SMC and our process, our services, is to provide recycling collections the same frequency as our garbage collections. And in the spirit of looking at what think about affordability, trying to minimize rate increases, this would allow us to do that. It would allow us to change to every other week. That's less vehicles, that's less wear and tear on the streets, it's less repair and maintenance, fuel, personnel, and even the cart impacts that we have out there. That would require some education to get our customers used to that. There are many other cities that we can remind you that we looked at that do this already, that do every other week pickup of the recycling. An alternative, in order to cover that ever-increasing negative delta in our transaction fees and our processing and our negative commodity values, would be to assess a $2 recycling surcharge for each of our residential and commercial customers for that service. That would provide us a similar revenue lift in order to offset the cost that we're seeing coming through from those. It allows us to maintain the current weekly schedule. And again, if we look at other cities that we've evaluated across the state, there are others who are doing that today as well to recoup some of these costs that are coming through.
Scott?
Next one.
Scott?
Yes.
Before you leave that, if you were to equate that $2 surcharge based on current usage, what would that equate to as far as an additional percentage increase in the base rate? Or if you don't know that, if you could send that to us.
Hold on, I think I can quickly. We have 70,000 customers thereabouts. Times 2 times 12 divided by. Yeah, let me get back to you on that one, Brian. It
is an increase in rate, and rather than discourage people from recycling, it seems like it might apply better just across the board as one option. I mean, that's not saying that's the only option, but it'd be good to have that option as well.
Sure. And I mean, it's a good question on the discouraging, because we don't want to disincentivize that behavior. Right now, we don't charge. There's not a separate line item on residential accounts for recycling. It's actually included in their fee today. You get a blue bin out in front of your house as part of your garbage rates. So it's kind of in there today. So whether how we would message that or how we would how that would actually resonate with the community as opposed to just building in their base rates. I mean, it's probably 6 and 1, but there could be some perception there.
Thanks.
So Scott, Councilmember Wilkerson here. As a resident, it's like, so you're going to cost me more, but my quality of service is going to go down. So there's probably a real disconnect. It does seem like it's disincentivizing. I just like, forget the recycling. I'll just put it in the trash because what am I paying more for unless I'm just really committed to that? So that will certainly be a messaging issue for our residents going forward, but it doesn't kind of make sense, I think, to the regular rate consumer.
It's there. That's a great point. One of the things that we recognize we haven't done a good job, and this is a lot of communities have struggled with this, is the cost of recycling. It's been perceived as a freebie, if you will, and it's not free. It's actually, if we were to truly break out the cost of a let's say a 60 8-gallon cart and show here's what it is for solid waste garbage, here's what it is for recycling, those two, it would be much different than today. The reasons we decided to collapse them into one are probably a lot of different reasons why. Maybe it was just for that reason. You didn't want to create this perception that recycling costs something and it was an opt-out. I mean, recycling is a compulsory service, but it really is up to everyone to do their own contribution to it. Perhaps it would be better just to add a $2 increase to all of the rates if that's a direction that we want to go. Again, the option that we're recommending really is to not add a cost, but kind of right-size the collections and be able to manage the cost increases that we're seeing within our existing collection schedule and operations. That's helpful.
Hey, Scott.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
How many, on like the average week, how many people choose not to put out their blue bins at present?
I believe the last one I saw there was, and Marlene, correct me if you've heard a better number, I thought it was a 60% participation rate.
Dustin should be on the call. He might have the best number there.
Oh, there we go. Forgot Dustin was on here.
I guess.
I'm sorry, this is Dustin. When I last reviewed it, we were running at about 70%. However, when you looked at the weights that were generated, I mean, we have alleys where the carts are always out. So there might be 3 pounds in it as opposed to 20 pounds in it. So we probably pick about 70% of the customers each week on the recycling routes.
Okay. Well, I guess what I'm worried about is placing this additional fee on so many people that really would probably opt out of the program if given the opportunity. And as we're seeing the other rates going up as well, and we're talking about adding fees for people even just going to the waste energy plant, it's just kind of never ending. I think the every other week makes way more sense to me than adding this additional tax, which really is a tax since people can't opt out, but we'll call it a fee for this purpose. So anyway, I just think we should be focused, especially today, when we've got so many people struggling to catch up, struggling to keep ahead, and we shouldn't be adding additional fees for a program that many folks just choose not to participate in.
Scott, I have a question about, let's go back to what you were talking about comparing solid waste with recyclables, and you said that you looked at both. And I'm wondering if there's been consideration as to determining which recyclables are actually not being recycled and taking those away so that isn't a cost. For example, We know that mixed paper is problematic. We know that some of the plastics are problematic. We know that bottles are problematic. So you aren't able to recycle those. Why not re-educate the community as to what is actually recyclable so we're not bearing that cost? We're actually taking them out of the recycle stream. Is that an option?
Yeah, that's exactly what we have been looking at. We have really, really good data from the MRF, the Materials Recycling Facility, that shows us what our commodity values or losses on each of them. And you highlighted all the ones that are negative. The valuable ones are still ones that we would want to come through there. And those actually are some of our highest cost items. Glass, mixed paper, and mixed plastics are some of our highest cost items. Our challenge continues to be we don't have an alternative outlet for them. If we say don't recycle your glass, the default is going to be to put it in your brown solid waste bin. That's then going to get up to the waste energy and going to get put into the boilers, which is really, really harmful and causes extreme high maintenance requirements for those. That's what creates clinkers and other sort of buildup in our boilers. So that's not a good outcome. The mixed paper is most likely fine as long as it's not moist. It could go into it and it has a good BTU value. The plastics, although it has a good BTU value, it has some emissions issues that get created that we're trying to avoid by bringing plastics out of the combustion process. So that's a challenge on this. You hit it right on the head. If we could find a way to get those things out, then we're not paying for not only the processing of it, but also the negative disposal of them when they have to sell them on the open market. But we have yet to solve for what's our other avenue to get rid of that stuff. We don't have that outlet right now, and no one does. I mean, there's been very few communities that have solved for that yet. There's promising things on glass. There's somewhat opportunistic things on plastic, but a lot of it is really kind of nascent markets that they haven't really firmly established themselves on our reuse of it. But this community has to deal with it. It's things that we are receiving today. It's one of the areas that we've probably not done our community a justice by positioning this such that recycling doesn't cost anything. Recycling has a cost to it, both in the collections of it and in the disposition of it.
Scott?
This is just a quick little...
Scott, I just had one more...
Sorry?
This is Brian. I just had one more comment. So if I understand what you're saying is that the recycling bins, regardless of any benefit of recycling, if people stop using the recycling bins and put glass and plastic into the brown, that is going to cost us more money because of maintenance and damage to the waste to energy plant. Is that fair to say?
I couldn't cite an exact dollar for dollar, but it is harmful to our boilers, and it does create emissions issues with the mixed plastics.
Okay. Thanks, and I'll let you go to your next slide.
Okay, I mean, it's a challenging problem to try to have to solve for. It's a dilemma that I wish we had a better path. I mean, ideally, we'd like to have a repository for glass that's separate from it, and that glass can go be repurposed somewhere else. We have a separate repository for mixed plastics. Those mixed plastics can go somewhere else. But absent of those secondary markets or reuse in the area here, our option, neither is a good option. It goes in a blue bin and it gets thrown into a landfill, and we get charged for it, or it goes into a brown bin and it goes to our waste energy and plant and it has negative impacts on our operations there. Just a quick.
This is Karen. I just need to make sure I understand this. So we're talking about increasing that fee or changing the service to once every 2 weeks. it feels to me like we're not being honest with our citizens, because I fill my recycling bin up every week, and now most of it's going to the garbage. So, I mean, in one hand, we're encouraging people to recycle. We're going to charge them more, or charge them a fee to do it, but yet we're just most of it's going to go in the garbage. I don't know how we make that work as far as communication.
It's the dirty little truth, if you will, about the state of recycling right now. Once the China sword went into back at the end of 2017-18, it just turned our recycling commodity markets upside down. The reality is all that blue stuff is still going to the waste management smart center. So everything's still going there. When they sort them all and put them into their individual piles, they then sell to the open market. The difference on those open markets is some buyers are paying to purchase those, and some buyers you're having to pay them to purchase them.
To take them.
Yeah, to take them. Yeah. So it's not that they're all.
So what's the percentage of the stuff going to that center? What's the percentage really that's being utilized, that people are taking? Do we know? We'd be better off saying, let's forget the recycling program. We're not able to do anything with it. We don't want to charge you for a program that you think you're participating in doing good things for the environment when we're not. I don't know. That's a hard one to get my head around.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, you're asking very, very insightful questions that are it's a challenging dilemma to solve for. We do know, Karen, what percentage we get invoices each month from Waste Management, so we know what our weights and volumes are by material. So we know kind of those percentages. We know which ones are negative value, which ones are positive value. We don't know, because our contract doesn't stipulate it with Waste Management, how they ultimately repurpose or sell those products off. That's not something that we have insights to, but what we understand is we know that the glass, for sure, is going to a landfill and used as daily cover or roadbed material. We know that one because that's what everyone's doing with their glass. We're not certain on the mixed paper and the mixed plastics. We just see that it costs them to basically permit them to a third party to do what they do with.
Okay.
And I wish I had better information on that. It's a little bit of the mystery in it, because we don't have access to, our contract doesn't allow us to have access to the ultimate destination of those products. Does that make sense? I know it's quite helpful, but okay.
So,
yep, thanks.
Scott, I'm going to kind of revisit my question a little more narrowly in light of what Karen said. So what I'm trying to get clear on is, from a financial operational perspective, if our only choice was keep the plastic and the glass in the blue bin, even though it's now costing us money instead of break even, or put it all in the brown bin, what would be the preference, just operationally and financially, so that we at least know what the incentives we want, even though none of the answers are good answers at the moment?
The most concerning one I have would be on the glass, and I'll need to visit with Chris. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Chris, that you may not have information, but is there anything that you could add to the conversation that you think would be helpful for council as we're thinking about the ultimate impacts of some of those currently recyclable products on our waste energy operations?
It's hard to say because it's variable that
If you mix in a steady amount, it might not have the same impact as if, we were all of a sudden hit with a large quantity of glass. That would cause more operational issues. So it's tough to gauge, but I think that if, there would need to be a focus on potential other avenues for the glass. If we didn't want to send it to waste management, we could explore collecting and using it for cover material at the Northside landfill, or other options that would potentially reduce the cost, but not have the operational impact at the waste energy facility.
All right, that's probably good enough today, but it is challenging, because I guess what I'm hearing from you is that it's not just environmental reasons that customers might choose. It's really a detriment to us if people stopped using the blue bin and put plastic and glass into it. So it's not really just a kind of a luxury add-on. It actually would be a substantial issue. So we may still want to encourage people to use the blue bin, sounds like.
Marlene, can I share something really quick? Can I take over the sharing? I wanted to show council what a monthly invoice looks like from Waste Management. Just gives a little bit more insights. Let's see here. I think this is the one. Okay, are you able to see that? I will increase the size if that's helpful. Is that viewable?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so this is a invoice that we get from Waste Management every month. It's broken out by your commodities, and I'll try to get these things correct. OCC is your cardboard. ONP is newspaper. You've got mixed paper. I don't know do you know, Chris, what's UBC?
Scott, this is Dustin. It's used beverage container, so aluminum can.
Okay, so it's aluminum's got it. Then you've got your steel, tins, and then PEAT and HDP are your thicker plastics. They do have some value. Then you have your mixed plastics and your mixed glass. As you go down here, you can see where the negative values are. You can see right here, it's in your mixed paper, it's in your mixed plastics, and it's your mixed glass as well. So there are values in other areas. The challenge is with the value of commodities being so depressed, we're only yielding $19,000 this is the month of July, in the commodity side. Well, that does nowhere near offset the cost of our transaction fees, which are right now $79 per ton. We're only earning $8 per ton on the commodity side. So we're upside down. That's where it's the costs that are fairly significant, and our commodity values are not strong enough to be able to offset those. I see Candace's question.
Hi, I'm going to turn my video off because I definitely understand if this was for profit, but the season that we can start cycling, and I don't know how to keep that in people's minds. This is helping the environment, and to sort of show the fiscal benefit of that reasons, but I just wanted to state that it's not always a balance sheet. Just my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a valid point. All those things are harder to tangibly put your arms around because what we see is primarily the cost of processing the revenue that we get from it, and how do you bring all those other things into the picture. Marlene, do you want to put that slide back up? One thing I did want to mention is if the desire was to go the route of a surcharge or some other reflection on the bill, one of the reasons we had suggested a surcharge as a secondary option was, should the commodity markets recover, we could make adjustments to that surcharge to reflect it. And so by having it separate, would be able to see that adjustment changing, or that surcharge changing over time. It's a big if, because I don't know. We don't know what the future looks like. The commodity markets don't seem to be projecting to strengthen. I won't go through this, but you can see where some of the other cities are going to.
I'm sorry, Scott. This is Councilmember Mumm. One other question. Let's say someone had excess recycling. We did the every other week. Can they just put that to the side and we'll pick it up? Like if we have a little extra cardboard or something, do we charge more for that? Or what if that cart's huge?
Yeah, I think what Dustin was highlighting earlier, there are some that they put them out every single week and they're only partially full, and others put them out every week and they use a lot of them. The routes are fairly automated. We do pick up some extra stuff if there's things out there, but we do that with a recycling vehicle. So I'm not sure the practical nature, if we were going to go to every other week and only pick up on those days, to deploy a vehicle out on the non-recycling collection weeks would add some additional cost structure we'd have to evaluate. I'm
sorry, I wasn't clear. I just meant on your day, let's a really full blue bin and you have extra cardboard. Can't you pick that up extra on the side or on top?
I believe we do that.
Second time.
Yep. Dustin, can you add a little bit of context there?
Councilmember Mumm, that is our current practice. And there is no charge component to it because there is no charge to recycling. So yes, if somebody has occasional extras with recycling, we do pick it up at no charge.
Well, if that's okay, then I support the every other week then.
So, Scott, just real quick, this is Councilmember Burke. What does it mean for staff if we go to every other week? Are we going to have cuts in employment or hours because of that? And then what does that look like on your end?
Essentially, we would have half the amount of needs with personnel and equipment. We would need to manage that down through vacancies that come through. I certainly wouldn't propose that any cuts are made of existing personnel. We'd manage through it, but it would result in less collection routes. We'd have the same amount of routes, but we'd have less frequency. So it would basically mean that the personnel needs would reduce. And we do it so that collections are still being done every single week. We would just not be in every single part of the city every single week.
I just have one more question, and I'm going to be quiet. So I'm thinking about the transfer stations. So we know that all of that garbage at the transfer stations come to the waste energy facility, right? So how are we figuring out county versus city? I guess we can't. But I guess my question is, I know that the county and the smaller cities that utilize the transfer stations, they pay less at the gate at the waste to energy facility. So what I'm wondering is, have we thought about maybe looking at raising that cost for them to dump? Because that, those recycling, we're getting all of that too, right, from the county and other areas. So, but yet they're paying less to dump all of it. So I guess, has anybody looked at maybe charging them more or adequate fee to dump all of that?
The recycling actually from all of the other municipalities and the transfer stations go directly to waste management. The city doesn't get involved in any of that stuff.
Okay.
I think, but your
My question then is, if not that, then the solid waste, the garbage, I mean, that might bring in some revenue.
You are correct. They are, the other municipals, the county transit stations do pay less of a gate fee than typically our commercial, like Sunshine and Waste Management would by coming in there.
And we pay a fee, the fees that we pay when we direct our garbage trucks to transfer stations. I don't know if that's changed, but it used to be we did not get a break in that fee.
Nope, we pay full gate. We pay full gate there. Yep.
So there's kind of an imbalance there that maybe we should look at as far as revenues and what we might be able to do there.
Yeah, so we've got, that contract comes up with the county in 2023. And so we certainly do have an opportunity to look at the financial economics of that contract. I know there's some, we've done some analysis before, cost to deliver there on more of our northerly routes versus the cost to drive all the way to the waste energy plant. And when you look at all that together, it kind of informs on a good, okay, I understand now why we're paying what we're paying here. The county tonnage has always been, it's significant enough that if we didn't have it, it would greatly impact our operations at the waste energy plant, our revenues that we need to charge. So there are a lot of economics that kind of are built into what that model looks like, but we certainly can, when that contract does come up in a couple of years.
I just think that's always been my question, is that when we divert our trucks to the transfer stations to dump their garbage, they go over the gate and they pay, is it $120 a ton or something?
I think it's 110 maybe. Yep.
$110 to dump.
Yep.
Then that's loaded up at the transfer station and moved to the waste to energy facility by, I don't know who, the Western States or whoever it is. And they go over the gate and they pay, to dump the same garbage, they pay $50, is it?
55, 58, yep.
Yeah, so that's never made sense to me. It's too bad that it's in place till 2023, but.
Yeah, and we could go through some more details on that. The economic benefit is the short distance to the transfer stations allows us to make quicker trips and pick up more stuff in our routes during the day. That would be extended out if we had to come back to the waste energy plant. You also have reduced fuel, reduced maintenance on your vehicles, so they actually do equal out pretty well.
Which is all great. That's all great. Just when that's loaded up again and taken by another entity to the waste to energy facility, they should pay the same.
Gotcha. Thanks. The engagement's great. I appreciate all the questions here because it gives us some additional things to think about on here. Any other things before I move past the recycling conversation? Okay, so this is revising our projections. If we were to change to every other week for picking up recycling, if you recall on our original projection, it showed us going negative reserves by 2024. This level sets us a little bit. We do drop down. Our lowest point we get is 3.4 million, and we start to build back up as we're going out to 2025. So 4.6 versus about a negative million in the original projections. The next one, the alternative, is if we place a surcharge on here. This is what the reserves show, and it's up to about 7.4. So the lowest we get is 5.4 in 2023. And we'll do a little side by side here so we can not be such of an eye chart. So here's the top line is the 2.9% only, do nothing, do not change anything with our operations or our costs. The second one is if we were to move to every other week recycling, no increase in cost, no surcharge, what the reserves look like. And then the third one is if we were to keep the service at weekly and look at the recycling surcharge implementing. And I will say throughout all this, even though we don't have any clear alternative uses of some of these negative value commodity products of recycling, we don't stop looking, we don't stop asking, we don't stop trying to find other alternatives. There's potentials out there. We haven't landed yet any good solutions that we could implement en masse. What we want to do is we want to make sure that any alternative that we find is sustainable, so that when we go out and do a broad education and a kind of here's what you do with that particular product, we can do it for the foreseeable future, and we don't just do it for 6 months and then revert back. That we believe that would cause a lot of disruption and havoc on our citizens' experience and just getting them used to how to treat recyclables.
Hey, Scott, Councilmember Mumm here. Quick question on the 3-month operating expenses target. Is that a recommendation, or why do we use 3 months?
That came from our rating agencies, so Finch and Moody's. They actually recommend that for municipal utilities, 3 months operating expenses is where they would position a higher rating on your agency or your utility for that. So that's just a number that we've used as kind of a best practice.
And have we ever hit it?
Yeah, we've been above this in solid waste for quite a few years.
So this is from COVID, basically.
I would say it's from COVID, it's from recycling, it's from the long-term effects of going single stream. We've lost $5 million in revenue from our brown bins from that, although it was for the right reasons. It's a number of things that have kind of led up to that.
Scott?
Marlene, was this yours or Chris's?
Scott, just in looking at your numbers, it looks like we might even have to consider doing both to get to those kinds of reserves. I mean, that's the other question.
I would recommend that I would suggest that we don't have to be at that number by 2025. It's really our own comfort as it relates to our reserve levels, because we don't have debt outstanding. We're not being assessed ratings for purposes of issuing debt to the market. I'm a big fan of not being the citizens' savings accounts. So when I look at our reserves in the utilities, it's really for capital purposes. It shouldn't be, I don't believe it should be for revenue shortfalls or other things. It should be for emergencies. What do we have as a cost that is unplanned, and allow it to cover some of those things? So while it's a good recommendation to have 3 months in there, I think we're sitting on probably more of the repairs dollars than perhaps we should be. And that's my personal opinion, but I think growing that back up and us deciding where we think a healthy reserve level is and managing to that. I mean, if we're seeing drops in revenue, we need to manage to that. I take that as our personal accountability and making sure we're responsive to those changes.
Thanks.
And some of the things are harder to manage to, like on the water side, when suddenly we have less electricity sales because of power purchase agreement. But by and large, we should be able to respond to some of the changes in our business experience. That might be one that would be good to tee up for a future conversation around policy on reserve levels for utilities. I know council has been having some detailed discussions with Tanya on general fund reserves, and we've really not spent a lot of that time. We know on the water wastewater reserve level based on our debt service covenants. We don't have it on the solid waste.
Chris probably is better at this than I am. So if you want to jump in here, Chris, go for it.
Okay, just to bring to light that the self-haul at the waste energy is subsidized, that when you factor in the amount of people required to process a ton of residential garbage versus commercial garbage, there's a significant added cost. Listed down below is the cost per transaction for a commercial transaction versus a self-haul. So one idea is a transaction fee, that money could be used to support neighborhood cleanups and similar priorities, and help reduce trips to the waste energy. And then also to tie in the recycling, we do offer recycling services here for free and are encountering the same issues that collections is. We've, haul the material next door to the MRF, and, it's of little, no value, in return, along with the household hazardous waste collection service that we offer. So a transaction fee would be another way to offset some of the losses.
And we talked about having this self-haul fee, help with some of the community.
So this next slide just basically shows the impact of that transaction fee annually. And then in addition to that, the county has a $2 transaction fee at its facilities as well. So this is consistent with other waste disposal sites in the area.
And we also wanted to point out that solid waste has already absorbed additional costs around community cleanup needs, around illegal dumping, and particularly around illegal camping pod cleanups. That's just been absorbed without additional revenue for that need. So, and we continue to have the neighborhoods asking for additional dollars for cleanup in their neighborhoods. So that self-haul transaction fee can be supportive of the things we're already extending for community support. So this just goes over the risks of adopting 3 years of rates. I think, Scott, you were going to talk about this, or do you want me to go ahead?
I can get it. This is just down below. I referenced one of the contracts that is expiring. There's a number of contracts expiring in the next three years, and that then provides a little bit of uncertainty into our business model because we don't know yet how those contracts are ultimately going to be renewed and what difference in their business models that they're going to be sharing with us. So it certainly is just something for this council to be aware of as we think about adopting rates for 2021 through 23. We're going to share with you what our recommendation is, but if any one of these contracts gets renewed and it has a potential negative impact further than what we're seeing today, it certainly could impact our financials for our solid waste differently. And again, it kind of highlights just the future of recycling. It's hard to have a crystal ball and see what that's going to look like and whether commodities will rebound, whether we'll find some breakthroughs in reuse of some of those negative value commodities. A lot of things could be changing in the years ahead. I think the next one is what we are. So this is our proposal. We've talked about the 2.9%. I think we'd recommend that council adopt it for 3 years, but then realize that we may have to come back and evaluate what our financials look like, what some of those new contracts get renewed or those existing contracts get renewed to see if we can maintain it at those levels. To only do 2 years and then to do a third year afterwards, we all see the amount of work and effort that goes into our 3-year rate setting process today. So our recommendation would be to adopt as is and then do a regular check-in to see how we're faring against what we are projecting to and see if we can stay with the rates that were adopted today. The recycling changes, we would propose to do those through a change in the collection schedule, not add a recycling surcharge. And then we do feel like there's a need to do some adjustment on our transaction fees to recover. It's similar to what we shared on the water wastewater with our septage haulers, our pretreatment, our GFCs, our meter and tap fees. we are not recovering the cost to deliver those services. Others are subsidizing them. So this would be an opportunity to kind of level set on the true costs of individually transacting small pieces of loads of garbage coming up to the waste energy plant.
Yeah.
And is there anything else, Brian?
Yes. Just going back to the transaction fee, it seems like that hits like your average person that's bringing a small amount. And I'm just wondering, can you get the equivalent of that dollars by increasing the tonnage rate? But maybe there's some type of state regulations around that. I mean, Karen was just explaining how it's a pretty low rate compared to our competition. So I'm wondering if there's room for the tonnage to go up without just hitting each person that goes out there with an extra $2 who probably doesn't even reach the amount of weight for the minimum charge.
So if I understand you correctly, let's say today, Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong. We have a certain tonnage rate, but there's a minimum charge, and I think the minimum is up to 300 pounds. So if it's $15 for a minimum, you're suggesting maybe we look at making it $17?
No, I'm just wondering if the charge on the weight, which would have less impact on your typical residential person who's making a trip as opposed to the commercial folks who are getting paid to do it and can pass on the costs to their customers as opposed to individual households. So I don't know if we have regulatory flexibility to change the tonnage charge or not.
We do. That's the gate fee I think you're referring to on a commercial gate fee. If we go back one slide, Marlene, the volumes here are kind of what inform. We would likely have to make a pretty significant increase on the gate fee to make up for those. Unfortunately, the driving behavior, I realize that some of people do come up on single small loads. How much of that could be just used in your garbage bin? There's a pretty these that are actually non-city residents of people bringing garbage in as well. They don't have compulsory garbage out in the county. So there's a subset of these numbers that are actually non-city residents too.
Can we charge a different rate for non-residents?
Chris, I know we ask people at the gate whether they're city or county and where what municipal they're in, but we rely on them to answer affirmatively or answer honestly.
Well,
that's correct. And, we just ask them to, indicate whether they're city or county.
Right.
So if you require ID checks, then that will just slow the processing time down.
Okay. But legally we can't. I'm just thinking even on your transaction fee model, if that's really who's using it, are people outside the city who don't have compulsory garbage, then that's kind of one issue. So
it's not all of them. I think, Chris, if I remember right, it's there's a fair amount of those that are actually in city residents as well.
Yeah, it's proximity to the waste energy facility that they come in to use it.
How do our gate rates compare to the county facilities?
Chris,
right now we're currently at $110 a ton, and that's the 2021 rate that the county's instituting. And then they also have the $2 fee along with that as well. So they're pretty comparable.
All right. Thanks. That's all I have. Anyone else have anything?
And so they
how often do we update the tonnage fee?
How often do we have which fee, Michael?
Yeah, how often do we update the tonnage fee?
Every third year we do that with our rate setting process, just like right now. This is these are our current ones, and you can see what a 2.9% increase would have over the next 3 years. I think that was all we had, unless there's some other things from the council, questions from the council, comments from the council.
Any other questions, comments? All right. Well, we are really appreciate, Scott, you and your team talking with us about this. We're at 3 o'clock, so I'm going to adjourn. We'll see you back at 3:30 at briefing, everyone. So we are adjourned.